All right, everyone, welcome back to Sip and Talk, and we're ready for another deep dive.
I'm ready, too.
You know, speaking of sipping, I almost choked on my coffee this morning.
Oh, no, why? What happened?
It wasn't because it was too hot. It was because of a rogue nose hair. I swear, it just appeared out of nowhere, like it was auditioning for a shampoo commercial.
Really?
Yeah, it was that long. It got me thinking, what is the deal with nose hairs? I mean, they're kind of gross, but they got to be there for a reason.
Right.
We're not just walking around with these random hairs for fun.
Yeah, you're right. And, you know, there's actually this theory floating around online that humans are the only lead creatures with nose hairs, and it's because we're aliens.
Wait, what? Aliens?
Yeah.
Now, hold on. You're telling me my dog who sniffs absolutely everything doesn't have nose hairs?
Well, this YouTuber with a very interesting laugh claims that's the case. Something about human evolution being different and nose hairs being the big giveaway. But yeah, lots of mammals have nose hairs. It's just that they're not always as prominent as ours. Think about cats rubbing their faces on everything, or chimpanzees.
Okay, so picture a chimpanzee with a big old bushy nose situation.
Right. We're not alone in the nose hair club, and there's a reason for that. These little guys actually serve a very important purpose.
Okay, I'm all ears. What's so important about nose hairs? Besides giving us a morning scare.
Think of your nose hairs like tiny little guardians. They're stationed at the entrance of your breathing system. They're like a first line of defense, filtering out all the dust, pollen, and microscopic junk that's floating around in the air.
So they're like a filter for our lungs, like those HEPA filters everyone's buying these days.
Exactly. They're like natural HEPA filters. They're trapping those bigger particles before they can make their way deeper into your respiratory system. And it's not just the nose hairs. There's a whole system in there working together. It's called the mucociliary clearance system.
Muco what now? That sounds kind of complicated.
It's actually pretty cool. So you've got your nose hairs catching the larger stuff. Then you have mucus, which traps smaller particles. And then you have cilia. They're like tiny hairs lining your airways, and they're constantly sweeping this mucus, along with all the trapped particles toward your throat. So you can either swallow it or cough it out.
Hold up. So you're telling me that all that gunk we cough up or swallow, that started in our nose?
Yep, pretty much. It's all thanks to that amazing cleaning crew working hard up in your nose.
Oh, wow. Okay, ew. But also fascinating. So we know that humans aren't alone in having nose hairs and that they act as filters. But why do WEs seem to have such prominent ones compared to our furry friends? I've never seen a dog getting a nose hair trim at the groomer.
That's a great question. It might have something to do with our evolutionary history. Scientists believe that early humans evolved in dry and dusty environments like the African savanna, so they developed more prominent nose hairs as an adaptation to those conditions.
So like our ancestors needed those extra filters to deal with all that dust and debris, like a built-in survival mechanism.
Exactly. It's like having a natural air purifier built right into your face.
That is amazing.
Okay.
But let's be real here. Even though they're important, nobody wants a forest growing out of their nostrils. Is it even okay to trim them?
Of course. In fact, regular trimming is recommended for hygiene. You know, those extra long hairs. They can become breeding grounds for bacteria.
Okay, yeah. That's enough to make me grab the trimmers right now.
Yeah.
But here's another thing I've always wondered. Is there like a proper nose hair length? Is there a sweet spot for optimal filtration without looking like a werewolf?
Well, it's less about finding the perfect length and more about keeping them trimmed and clean.
Okay.
But here's a fun fact. The density of your nose hairs can actually vary based on the environment you live in.
Wait, seriously. So someone living in, say, a super polluted city might have thicker nose hair than someone living in a pristine mountain village.
That's the theory. Our bodies are constantly adapting to our surroundings. And nose hair density might be one of those really fascinating adaptations.
Wow, I never thought I'd find nose hairs so interesting. They're like tiny indicators of our environment. Little hairy detectives telling stories about the air we breathe.
I love that analogy. And it makes you wonder, what else could those little hairs tell us? Could they hold clues to our ancestry? Or even our health?
Now, that's a deep dive I'd love to take. Imagine our nose hairs as tiny time capsules, holding secrets about where we come from and who we are. It's like something out of a sci-fi movie.
Right. It makes you look at those often overlooked hairs in a whole new light. Welcome back, Sip and Talkers. We're going to dive into some seriously strange nose-related stuff.
Okay, hit me with the weirdest nose facts you got. I'm talking things that make you go, wait, that actually happens.
All right, get ready for this one. Have you ever heard of rhinoliths?
Rhino what now? That sounds like something out of a fantasy novel.
It's not as scary as it sounds, but it's definitely strange. Basically, a rhinolith is a hard object that forms inside your nasal cavity, almost like a rock.
A rock in your nose. How does that even happen?
It usually starts with something small getting lodged up there, like a bead or a piece of food or even a hardened bit of mucus. And then over time, minerals from your nasal secretions, they build up around this object layer by layer until you have a full-blown rhinolith.
Okay, first of all, ew.
Mm-hmm.
Second, how would you even know if you had one of those things up there?
Well, they can cause all sorts of fun symptoms like nasal congestion, difficulty breathing, persistent bad smells, or even nosebleeds.
Oh, no.
So if you're experiencing any of those, it's probably worth getting checked out by a doctor.
Noted. I'll be sure to add rhinolith check to my to-do list.
Well, okay.
What else have you got?
All right, prepare yourself for this one. Olfactory hallucinations.
Olfactory Okay, you lost me. Break it down for us non-scientist folks.
Basically, it means smelling things that aren't actually there.
Wait, so like phantom smells. So you could be just sitting in your living room smelling like freshly baked cookies, but there are no cookies anywhere.
Exactly. It can be anything from pleasant smells like cookies
Yeah.
to really unpleasant ones like burning rubber or rotten egg. Imagine constantly smelling something awful. That isn't even real. Talk about a bad day.
That sounds terrible. What causes those phantom smells?
It can be triggered by a variety of things, from infections and nerve damage to head injuries and even certain medications. Sometimes it's temporary, but it can also become a chronic condition.
Wow, so it really makes you realize how much we rely on our sense of smell.
Yeah,
When it gets messed up, it can really mess with your reality.
absolutely. And it highlights how interconnected our senses are with our brain and our perception of the world. But hey, speaking of strange things, did you know that there are actual world records related to noses?
Wait, really? Is there a Guinness World Record for the longest nose hair? Because I think I might have a contender.
Haha. Well, sadly, there's no official record for nose hair length. But there is a record for the longest nose on a living person.
No way. Tell me everything.
The current record holder is a Turkish man named Mehmet Özürek. His nose measures a whopping 8.8 centimeters. That's over 3 inches. From bridge to tip.
3 inches. Wow. That's got to make wearing sunglasses a challenge.
I'm sure it comes with its own set of unique challenges, but hey, at least he's got a world record to show for it.
Okay, I'm officially adding start a campaign for a longest nose hair world record to my to-do list right after rhinolith check. But seriously, all this talk about noses has me thinking, how do you think they'll evolve in the future?
That's a great question. Our environment is constantly changing, and our bodies tend to adapt over time. So it's totally possible that our noses, including those amazing nose hairs, could continue to evolve too.
Right. Like will future humans have superpowered noses with filters that can block out even the tiniest pollution particles?
Yeah.
Or maybe our noses will develop some kind of early warning system for bad air quality, like a built-in pollution sensor.
It's fun to imagine the possibilities. Maybe those seemingly far-fetched ideas aren't so crazy after all. But before we get lost in the future, why don't we take a moment to explore the cultural side of noses? Because believe it or not, something as simple as a nose hair can have different meanings around the world.
Ooh, cultural differences. I'm in. Let's dive into the fascinating world of noses across cultures. We're back and ready to explore the world of noses. From a cultural perspective, because let's face it, something as small as a nose hair can have some pretty big social implications.
That's so true. Our ideas about beauty and what's considered attractive or acceptable are heavily influenced by the culture we grew up in. And noses being right there in the middle of our faces, they're definitely subject to those cultural interpretations.
Okay, so we've talked about how visible nose hairs are generally a no-no in a lot of Western cultures. But is it the same everywhere? Are there places where little nose hair action is totally cool?
Well, stylish might be pushing it, but definitely more accepted. You know, in some cultures where facial hair is more common and embraced, visible nose hairs might not raise any eyebrows.
That makes sense.
Okay.
It's like if you're rocking a full beard, a few nose hairs might just blend right in. It's all part of the overall look.
Exactly. And it's fascinating to think about how these perceptions have evolved over time. You know, if you look back at historical figures, especially men, a little nose hair was often just part of the package.
Right. Like nobody was stressing about perfectly trimmed nose hairs in those old paintings and sculptures.
Exactly. It makes you wonder how much of our current aversion to visible nose hairs is driven by societal pressures and marketing, rather than any real aesthetic issue.
Okay, but beyond just appearances, do noses hold any deeper cultural significance?
Oh, absolutely. In many cultures, the nose is associated with certain personality traits or even spiritual beliefs. For example, in some traditions, a large nose is seen as a sign of intelligence or a strong character.
Interesting. So it's like those old sayings about following your nose or having a nose for trouble.
Exactly. The nose is often linked to intuition, instinct, and even wisdom in many cultures. It's fascinating to explore how these beliefs have shaped our language and storytelling.
It really makes you realize how much we take our noses for granted. They're not just these things sticking out of our faces. They're deeply connected to our history, our culture, and even our sense of self.
I completely agree, and it all comes back to that initial question we posed: what's the deal with nose hairs? Well, as we've discovered, they're so much more than just a grooming challenge. They're essential for our health. They offer insights into our evolutionary past, and they even carry cultural significance. It's amazing what you can learn from a deep dive into something as seemingly simple as a nose hair.
I know, right? I'm looking at my nose hairs in a whole new light now. They're like tiny ambassadors, representing millions of years of evolution and a whole tapestry of cultural beliefs.
And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. But before we go, we want to give a shout out to our good friend Micky and his awesome YouTube channel, Mickytolife.
Yeah. If all this talk about noses and different cultures has you feeling adventurous, you need to check out Micky's channel. He's got these incredible travel stories, whiskey-tasting adventures, and he explores all sorts of hidden gems around the world.
He's got this infectious laugh and a real knack for storytelling. You can't help but smile along with him as he takes you on these amazing journeys.
So head over to YouTube and search for Mickytolife. Tell him Sip and Talk sent you. And in the meantime, cheers to all of you out there for joining us on this deep dive into the world of noses.
Cheers to noses, and cheers to all our amazing listeners. We'll catch you next time on Sip and Talk.